we are so pleased to welcome the next conversation to our main stage. We've invited a group of leaders who are each guiding efforts to improve diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging to the GEOINT community, or as we like to think of it, building a high-resolution GEOINT community. Because, as we know, in the GEOINT world, we understand that higher resolution images, those with discernible and important differences, make for better intelligence. The same holds true for the people who comprise the community. Our individual differences make us a more powerful whole. I'd now like to welcome to the stage Moderator Chris Armstrong, co-owner Veritas Culture, Maisha Glover, Senior Vice President, Booz Allen Hamilton, Jason Hall, CEO, Greater St. Louis Incorporated, and Tonya Wilkerson, Deputy Director of NGA. So welcome, and before they get started, we have a short video to share brought to us by Adobe.
I was 7 when I was walking to school, and some kids said that the gray dog was better than I was because it was gray and I was black.
Spanish was my first language, and I was insecure about my English.
I was hesitant to come out because I was afraid that I would get kicked out of my sorority, I would lose my friends, that my parents would treat me differently.
It wasn't uncommon for a young Hispanic kid to be harassed and to be just jumped and beat up. Yeah, those are the kind of things that I grew up with. And
I remember being at one of my jobs. I was pregnant with my first daughter. Somebody said, you're pregnant. Your earning potential is done.
This gentleman came up to me and literally started talking to me like this. How are you today?
When I say things like my husband, there's always that little pause of what are they gonna say? What are they gonna think?
I've always struggled with feeling like, I deserve to be at the table.
I think having served in a combat zone, sort of the harsh reality of what being in the military is really for.
For years, I would find myself being the only woman in the room whenever we had a meeting.
It starts to build an idea in your mind that I'm not enough, I'm not worthy of being who I am.
I love all of these.
Like a beginning picture? Okay.
Adobe for All, to me, means that you can come from any background and have a place and a part here at the table.
We don't treat anybody differently just because they're from another country or from another culture.
That we embrace you and we want you here. We want you to express your individuality at our company.
Everyone who works at Adobe or is a part of the Adobe experience can just be their true selves.
Adobe's culture is very strongly rooted in people and making sure that we treat people well.
Technology needs the best ideas to stay competitive. And why would you only hire from less than 50% of the population?
So when I came to Adobe, I don't believe we were as diverse as we are today.
I don't think I'd be as successful as I am today had I not had the mentors that I've had, in the last year that I've been here.
I think it's important to let people know that it's okay to be who you are and to be your authentic self.
I think our company should look a lot like the people that we service, and that's going to be everyone worldwide.
By bringing people with different backgrounds, bring different ideas and different perspectives.
So I think that there's definitely a steady increase of diversity coming into Adobe, and it makes me happy to see.
I would say it resonates well with the Indian phrase, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It means the entire world is one big family.
I'm a global citizen.
I am a lover, not a fighter.
I'm a mom.
I'm my authentic self.
I am a black woman.
I am gay.
I am a leader, period.
I am a proud Nigerian American Californian.
I'm a gay woman.
I'm a father.
I'm the go-getter who makes things happen.
Very blessed person.
This is me. This is who I am.
I really resonate with Adobe for All, and I am proud to work here.
So I was at the last GEOINT conference when they played the video, and I love it because it's authentic. My name is Chris Armstrong, and my song of the day today is going to be Round and Round by Tevin Campbell.
Good morning. My name is Tonya Wilkerson, and my song of the day is What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong.
My name is Maisha Glover, and I'm a Senior Vice President at Booz Allen, and I'm passionate about really developing and the next workforce of the future. And so part of what I really focus on is really putting some action behind that, right, and really moving. So I'm committed to mentorship. And when I put small cohorts together in groups, we come up with a theme song, something that it binds us and empowers us. And so my song is Roar by Katy Perry. And I love the words. There's some that says, I used to bite my tongue and hold my breath, scared to rock the boat and make a mess. So I said quietly, agreed politely. But then it goes on to say, but I got an eye of a tiger dancing through the fire, because I am a champion and you're going to hear me roar. Jason, what about you?
Wow. Well, I'm going to dare to be different today. Jason Hall, CEO of Greater St. Louis, Inc. And I'm going with a podcast of the day, which was the alternative. And I would promote Something Extra, which is a podcast by one of our founders, a technology founder, Lisa Nichols, back in St. Louis. Her firm is Technology Partners. And Something Extra brings together a globally diverse group of leaders intentionally. And she is highlighting what is that something extra that all of us have to contribute across all forms of identity to be better leaders and bring out the best in all. And guided by her faith, her commitment to St. Louis, it is really inspiring, and I encourage everybody to give it a try. Something Extra.
So if I could, I'll add a little bit more about the song, What a Wonderful World. I chose that song because I felt like it was really about inclusion, and it was appreciating the small things, nature, and other things that really connect all of us, no matter what our background. And what resonated with me were the words, I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you.
And I'll just end by saying, if you haven't heard the song Round and Round, some of the lyrics are, we can talk all we want to, but the world still goes around and round. And we do a lot of talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly over the last couple years. And what I love about today, the panel today is I'm not going to have to do a lot of moderation because you have voices here who are going to talk, yes, but talk about action and talk about change and what change really looks like. Because look, nothing comes from dreamers but dreams, and that's another line in the song. We have to get out of dreaming and get into doing. So with that in mind, I'd actually like to turn the first question over to you, Tonya, if that's okay.
Happy.
And I would ask I just want to know what brings you into this space now? And by now, I mean over the last couple years or in the current role you're in, what energizes you about work in this space? And then the same question for other panel members.
Sure. So I'll draw on a personal experience that I think has really shaped my trajectory. And it goes back a couple of decades ago, and it's a really simple story. And I was working as a first-line supervisor at the time, and I had a manager who some mornings would walk in and look in my office and would greet me with a cheerful hello. And then other mornings would walk in and look into my office and not say anything. Now, I don't think this was intentional, but what really hit me was the impact of the small action, or in this case, inaction, of greeting, simply greeting me each day, right? It made the difference of whether or not I felt like I belonged and was included, or whether or not I felt excluded. And so for me, that one small experience made me make a personal commitment, and it's a very small personal commitment, right? And that was that I would be intentional, but not just intentional, also consistent in greeting everyone that I met each day. Now, if you know me, I'm from a rural area, so that's really not hard for me to do, because that's what we do where I grew up. We always greet one another. But what it was really about was thinking about how I could incorporate a small action every single day that would help to fuel the feeling of belonging and inclusion in my own workspace.
Let's keep it rolling.
How about you, Maisha?
I mean, that's powerful. And, you know, I've been supporting the community for the past 20 plus years, and I think some experiences, personal experiences, really propelled me to becoming a business executive that prioritizes inclusion and diversity. Not just someone who is committed to it, but truly who prioritizes it. You know, I can recall being that young professional and really trying to assimilate, doing everything possible to fit in. You know, purchasing black, blue, and brown shoes because I just wanted to fit in. You know, going to those meetings and you already know that you were different. I was either the youngest or one of very few women, or oftentimes the only woman of color sitting at the table. And I recall as well sitting at the table and being in briefings and problem-solving sessions and having some great thoughts, some really good perspectives that I wanted to share. And it would be right there at the tip of my tongue, sitting there, but I wouldn't say anything. I would be silent because I would look beside me and I would see someone who has 20-some years of experience, and I would ask myself, is there anything that I can truly add that would have impact to this discussion? I remember turning to my left and seeing someone and saying, well, they know this region, this technology better than I do. So should I really offer something up? And then I also recall a few leaders who would lean in, that would lean in and say, Maisha, I remember during our branch meeting, you had a thought about X, Y, and Z. Would you like to share? Or someone that would say, during our meeting to that customer, you shared A, B, and C. Can we problem solve that as a group? Those were pivotal moments for me because they provided a voice, an opportunity for me to have a voice, to find my voice. And I knew that I wanted to be a business executive like that. When I think about the threats that we face as a nation, we can't afford to have anyone sitting at the table quiet and silent. We need to hear from everyone now. We need them to provide every perspective, every insight as soon as possible. You know, Tonya, I say it all the time. In this world and what we face, sameness is not an asset.
That's true.
Right? And so I would say to the young professional that is listening to me right now, that wonders, do they have a voice? Should they open up their mouths at that table? Absolutely do it. Don't get bogged down by the bureaucracy and the silos of organizational structure. Say it. You may stumble, you may stutter. I did, but keep pushing on. I would say to that working mom, I know it's tough, juggling being a mom and working. I know it oh so well, right? And then also for that mom that may have stepped out because of COVID-19, right? And now re-engage and wondering and question, can you really have the impact today? Absolutely. Say it. Find your voice. I would say to that woman or man of color that still may walk in the team room, that person that may be a developer and getting in there with the teams and still may be the only or one of few. Push through. Speak. Find your voice. Wear the fuchsia shoes. Speak. Be confident and roar. That's what I would say. What about you, Jason?
Well, two sort of life events for me underscore my commitment to DE&I and belonging. The first is personal, my life journey. Being the first in my family to graduate from high school or college, and knowing those barriers that I had to overcome, which of course were not alone, it's a reminder of the talent that exists in this country, and that if we disconnect opportunity from sort of all areas of talent, we have a miss. And I often think as challenging and as tough as it was to overcome those barriers, had I been a student of color, those barriers would have been even higher. And I can't imagine that, as hard as I had to fight to get across that stage. And so I always vowed, if ever in a seat to make a difference, I wouldn't lose perspective on that or lose sight of that, and stand with others that overcome that, because I think it makes us a better country, a safer country, and a more competitive country by embracing all of the talent and human potential that we have here. Secondly, where I was reminded that even when you overcome some of those barriers, I was the first person in Missouri, where my home is in St. Louis, to be an openly gay appointed person to a governor's cabinet. And even then, after overcoming those barriers, simply having served my state and wanting to continue to serve my state and earning the trust and confidence of a governor, I saw both the best and worst of what it is to be a first at that table, with both a crushing confirmation hearing, dealing with issues that nobody else had to deal with. I just simply hope it's easier for the second person. And so those life events are a reminder that no matter how hard you work, there are very real barriers in this country, but together we can bring those barriers down and be a safer and more competitive country.
So I would just add, because your comments, Maisha and Jason, were just resonating with me, that it's really important for us to be comfortable in bringing our authentic selves to the table. And I know personally for me, that was something I struggled with early in my career. I resonate with the point you made, Maisha, about understanding what we think it looks like to be a business executive. I certainly had a vision in mind of what that looked like. But I also thought that it was really just focusing on the work at hand and not necessarily giving people a window into who I am as an individual. And at the moment that I realized that it was bigger than me, right, and that I really needed to bring my whole self into the discussion, it was amazing how many people I connected with that really needed to hear me say, yes, I'm serving in the senior leadership role, but I'm a mother, right? And so before I leave in the morning to get here, I have to cook breakfast, right? I have to get my children out to school. And this is how I balance all of those different things in my life. It made a huge difference, right? And so I think that's, if there's any piece of advice that I would give, and that is to encourage everyone to bring their whole self, their whole authentic self to the table.
And what I'm hearing actually is a pretty good dovetail into something that I think each of you could speak to. I'm hearing intentionality. I'm hearing the little things, which I love, because so much of it is about programs and programmatics. I'm hearing the humanity. But there is no humanity. There is no humanity when we treat it like a Gantt chart, when we treat it like a business case, which is what we've done for decades. So here's my question to all of you, and I'll start with Maisha first in this case. So if you focus on the little things, you focus on letting people be their authentic selves, you try to deprogramize it and just do something about it, right? Just lean in. What is something you find yourself doing in your organization to try to influence change that isn't something we've seen for 20 years, unconscious bias training, whatever? And each of you can answer that.
Yeah. So, there's tons of research out there that states that, companies, organizations that are more inclusive and diverse really outperform other organizations and companies. And for private sector companies, which I am a part of, the bottom line is profitability, right? And so, the research indicates that you are far more profitable, that if you have inclusive and diverse organizations. And so, regardless if you think it's the right thing to do, especially for my industry peers that are out there, it's the most profitable thing to do as well. And we, as industry, cannot continue to support the missions that we are so passionate about unless we are providing the most digital, diverse, geospatially, and geographically organizations and people providing top solutions. So we have to be able to retain that talent. We have to be able to upskill that talent. We have to be able to retool that talent. We have to make sure, to your point, Tonya, that people feel like they belong. And so most recently, I was asked to lead a larger organization, and I met with my leadership team. And again, Chris, I believe you act the way. You don't just have a theory, an idea. We need to move beyond just a reimagining and talking strategy and actually doing, right? It may not be perfect each time, but we have to now move towards action and doing it. So I kicked off this meeting, and all of my leaders, I'm meeting some for the very first time, and I said, we're gonna create this new agenda. And I understand that we need to talk about the financials and the metrics. We need to talk about where we are with headcount. We need to talk about where we are with profit and revenue, but we're gonna begin this meeting with a discussion on belonging. We're gonna talk about what the difference is between diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we'll roll into our financials, and I'll turn it over to that person to talk about our financials. But I would ask each and every one of my leaders that when you're hosting a meeting, that you think about this agenda, that we not think about it as a programmatic thing that we talk about separately. But if you believe the research and you believe that it's the right thing to do, then let's include it into our daily discussions. Let's not wait for our Chief Diversity and Equity Officer to do it. We need them. Let's not wait for our EE office to find we need that governance, we need the metrics, we need the accountability, but they should partner with us. In order for us as a community to truly move the needle, we need every single leader and every organization and every industry partner to take ownership. So I asked, would you join me? I asked each one, think of a way of building inclusive environments today, this week. Not just activities that connect us, but activities that result in belonging, where people feel like they can be that working mother, where people feel like they could be openly a member of the LGBTQ community, and feel like they can bring their best to self. What will you do as a leader? And we're holding those discussions right along with profitability, margins, headcount, how we're serving mission, all in an integrative approach. What about you, Tonya?
So I just absolutely love that. One of the things that I've done since joining NGA, and because I really believe that we set the tone from the leadership at the top, right? To be able to infuse the right sort of focus on diversity and inclusion across the organization. I've been meeting with our special emphasis councils. And so, these are specific portions of the community representing, African-American employees, Hispanic-American employees, the deaf and hard of hearing community, just to name a few. And what I've been trying to spend time doing is really hearing them, listening, actively listening to what's working well, right, in our organization, and what are things that you'd like to see us address, right? And so I just had a really powerful discussion, it's a little more than a week ago, with our deaf and hard of hearing community. And they stepped through and gave me a sense of all the things that we've done from an accessibility perspective within NGA already today, but also gave me an eye toward what are the things that we still need to do, right? Because diversity and inclusion and really creating an inclusive environment doesn't happen overnight, right? This is going to be a continuous process. So there's always something that we can do to evolve our posture. And so that's what I've been working on. How about you, Jason?
Well, for us in St. Louis and my organization in particular, it's playing out in the geospatial world. And I will talk very specifically. You probably wonder, what's going on with all these St. Louis people? They got the t-shirts on, they're everywhere, they seem to be super excited. We want you to come be a part of this, but let me tell you why, because it ties into this discussion, why it's so, I think, deeply personal to us. We launched an initiative following the NGA's decision to invest almost $2 billion. I know if the NGA is listening, it's 1.7, but I'm in economic development, so I always round up when it's good. But so almost $2 billion. If you're here from GSA, it's 1.7. But building this new headquarters in St. Louis, we came together as a community and said, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to get some things right. So we said, first, we had the opportunity to build a table from day one to say, how do you bring universities, the public leadership, the startup community, and the business sector all together around one table and start thinking 10 years down the line, because we have basically 5 years after this decision before the headquarters opens, to say, what do we want to be true? What do we want it to look like? Who's included? And we formed what we call our GeoFutures initiative, and we centered racial equity from day one. Anybody that had a pen on our roadmap that we're executing every single day was participated through an intensive anti-bias, anti-racism training, just as a starting point as they were writing that they brought it. Secondly, you cannot divorce where the NGA's investment that is occurring from a very specific form of history and racism in this country in St. Louis. North St. Louis City, where the NGA is citing this decision, is a human face of the racial and spatial inequities that we often talk about in this country in a very general sense. And we wanted to get it right. We said we want to be able to embrace the full diversity of this community and make the NGA and the opportunity to be a global geospatial hub not only good for this country in a technology sense, but we wanted to use it as a force for good to address those barriers. And a lot of things flowed from that. I mean, one, we're very proud, and I encourage you all in your own communities. Too often in St. Louis, we overlooked our HBCU. It was an afterthought in civic discussions. They were there on day one and shaped this roadmap, and we are so proud in St. Louis that our HBCU, the only HBCU in St. Louis, is now a proud national education partner to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. We're proud. Secondly, we took on the courage of linking community development, which is often not in the discussion of how you grow an economy because of where this anchor institution, the NGA, was going to be located. As a result of that, we made it very intentional and held ourselves accountable that we would engage with residents to make sure that they have a role in shaping their community. Because I'm not sure there's a place anywhere else in this country where you have a space that represents those racial inequities. You're dropping in a $2 billion catalytic investment. Change is going to occur, but we have the opportunity with intention to shape who benefits, who participates, and who gets a say. And last year, when this GEOINT convention was hosted in St. Louis, our mayor came out and announced her massive investment, our first Black female mayor in the city of St. Louis, her massive investment in community-led development so that it's not an afterthought. We're not bringing it in to solve a problem that was created because we didn't think with intention on day one. It's all part of it. So if you have the courage to just set that table right, be inclusive, learn what you don't know, and listen, a whole different set of outcomes flow. And we're proud now to be at the center of this country, diversifying the workforce in STEM, in the GEOINT community very specifically. Many of our partners that are doing that work every day are here. Meet with them if you want to learn more about that. Come to St. Louis and be a part of it, but please, for the interest of this country, take some of those ideas back to your own community. It's hard, it can be scary, but you can learn too, and you can become a champion for this.
You know, Chris, what I loved listening to all these stories, right? It truly represents diversity of thought, right? We're all different perspectives, and we didn't hear the stories until today, right, of each other's stories. And it also just re-emphasizes the importance of just doing it, being different, not accepting status quo, right? This was just leaders or leadership teams saying, let's do something different. Let's move out. Look at what we're doing today. This is main stage discussion, right? On Monday morning, and we're having a discussion about equity and inclusion of what matters most, our people. It took a leader. It took leadership team to just do it. And that's each and every one of us, right? We can do this.
Well, it's all human-centered. So even as you started talking, what you started talking about was understanding, yeah, there's a business need for it, but the way you're executing the business need is from the human center. And so it's same with you. Rather than go out and do a bunch of surveys, which, by the way, will never tell you how people actually feel, you said, I'm just going to talk to people. Your whole point about racial equity. There is no diversity without equalizing access and opportunity. We always talk about diversity and inclusion, but there is no diversity without equalized access and opportunity. It's human. So here's my question to you based on all of that, because every one of you are coming at it from a very human-centered approach. And I hope that, not that you're not, that's what I love about you, that you will be even more blunt to your answer to this question, because it's going to be a pretty straight out of the gate question. So for all of the efforts that each of you are undertaking, what could derail it? And we'll start with you, Jason. What can derail the type of effort, the exact one you talked about, and then we'll go to you, Tonya, and then to you, Maisha.
Yeah, I think it's, one, not writing down those commitments and being specific about what that is, because it creates a system of accountability, transparency. Two, trying to go too fast. It's real easy sometimes to say it's urgent, we have to act now, and I feel that every day. As a city, an older industrial city in the Midwest that's transforming itself, we need to grow, but you gotta stop and listen and learn from those that you're working with. I think not doing that, and I'll just give you a very specific example where the NGA is going. Look, in my business, it's all growth. We want to talk about growth. Sitting down and listening to some existing residents, where this massive NGA investment's coming, said, in my family, when I heard growth, we were moved from here to here, then from here to here. Those issues of kind of displacement or second thought and not listening to residents is very powerful. And it was eye-opening for me to say, growth is a good thing. But if you've not been heard in that process and not really stop and reflect on that history that can occur, that has occurred, I think it can derail everything. And just not building those tables that really reflect the community that you're serving. Because that's where you get better. Everyone's gonna make mistakes. I think you just need to own that. That's human. Come into it with a level of humility that you're here to learn and truly listen. And I'm a lawyer by training. That can be a challenge, you just want to keep going. But I really think listening to those that are different from you and trying to hear what they are saying and incorporate that into the work, the failure to do that will derail this work.
I got to tell you, but if you don't mind, as a transition to what you're about to say, when you first started talking, I was about to pull your card because you were like, almost like slow it down, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying be intentional about who you talk to, who you bring into the space. Because too many people say, well, change takes time, but change takes time is a virus of the mind. Change doesn't take time, people take time. And you're saying include the right people. Love it. And you said that earlier about the intentionality. Yeah. So your answer to the question.
No worries. So I'm going to pull the thread a bit on what Jason was talking about, because my introduction to NGA was very exciting when I visited out in St. Louis, and for those that were there, and Jason, you probably remember this, you couldn't get me out of the room. I was so excited about the holistic approach that was happening in St. Louis, right? The partnerships that were going on between nonprofits, as well as the universities and industry partners, and how we, from an NGA perspective, were playing in that, right? With educational partnerships with schools like Harris-Stowe State University, as well as with University of Missouri, St. Louis. But all of those things, and I think, Maisha, you made this point, really came about because of a leadership commitment. And so if you ask me the question of what could derail the efforts, it's the lack of that commitment, right? That to me would be the derailing factor. Now, I'm not worried about that from an NGA perspective, because I know this leadership team, and I can certainly attest to our focus and commitment to diversity and inclusion and the success of things like what are happening in St. Louis as a model for what we can do in other regions as well. But to your question of what could derail, it's lack of commitment.
Okay, because we have a time left, I'm looking at this. I want to ask you a follow-up question.
Sure.
When you've seen leadership not be committed, what does that look like and what happens?
So I think what happens is it sends a mixed message to the workforce.
Okay.
And so when that occurs, people don't really know how to align because they're not really sure where their leadership is aligned. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And dollars.
Yes.
I suppose. Okay.
Yes, and dollars. So.
It does. I think it's a simple 4-letter word, but it's a really powerful 4-letter word, and that is fear.
Fear. Okay, tell us more.
You know, sometimes we're fearful of how to do it. There's intentionality, there's commitment, but sometimes we're fearful. Will we fail? Will I say the right thing? Am I really a DE&I expert? How do I do this? What if I stumble? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do? How do I actually make it happen? It's fear. And then it's focus, right? Because we're all so busy. We have tons of things to do. We talk about being moms, right? We talk about being wives and husbands and spouses, and we talk about just being community advocates and all the volunteer work. We're juggling so many balls, and then even just in the day-to-day tactical things that we do in the workplace. So it's the focus. Last year I worked for a female executive, and she put a focus around client engagement. She says, we cannot serve the missions that we do with excellence, right, unless we are out there with our clients. And you know, that was a little challenging in the middle of COVID in the last year and a half, right? But she says, you can use WebEx, you can use Zooms, but I need you to engage with your clients. And she says, and to keep the focus, I'm gonna keep you accountable. That's what we need, accountability and focus, because the likelihood is things will get busy and we will get, you know, swamped, and we all are juggling all these things. But it's the fear and the focus that I think are challenges to the great thoughts that we have, and many times the intentionality to truly do the right thing.
So I have a follow-on for you, and then I have a follow-on for Jason as well. Yep. So what you said resonates for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is because I've been in this space for a while. In the federal government, I was the director of diversity inclusion, all that sort of stuff. People would always come up to me and say, how do you do it? How do you talk to people as a white person? And there was fear there. What would you say to them?
I would say, talk just like you talk about everything else. That's where the authenticity comes into play. You are a mom, you're juggling things. You are a female executive, you've had challenges, right? You are an ally, right? And that's another thing I would say, become an ally, right? I am not a member of the LGBT community, but I'm a strong ally. I listen, I learn, I ask questions. I understand the use of pronouns, right? And that's what we do. You can learn so much, and most importantly, it provides you an opportunity to have an additional lens. And that's what it's about. It's about taking that additional lens and looking through that, because maybe the lens that you have only allows you to see one vantage point. So it's having that additional lens. So be an ally. But I would say allyship, jump in there, and know that you will stumble, you will stutter, you will fail, but just like everything else, you stumble, you fail, you get back up, and you keep pushing forward.
I love that piece about listening and learning, but then taking all that you've heard and that you've learned and translating that to action.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's really the critical piece.
And you're introducing some vulnerability. So there's fear, there's vulnerability. So that brings me to you, Jason, if I could ask you. So what I heard you say, and I think we all heard you say, is you're in a community where you are prioritizing racial equity and maybe talking to city leaders, because I heard you about how difficult your confirmation process was, which tells me you're talking in front of and around leaders who might not even see it as a problem, see it as their problem to solve, and yet you don't have that fear, or if you do, you're pushing through it. What advice do you have?
Well, I'll tell you, I think oftentimes we think on as we've talked about, on a human scale, and it is certainly the right thing to do. Confront that and you know, build an inclusive organization, inclusive tables. You all have a personal sphere of influence by which to accomplish that. I've been challenged by, you know, a lot of my peers say, folks, it's the only way we compete. This is a business imperative. One of the refrains you will continue to hear is there is a war for talent. And I'll tell you, and this is one of those examples where language can be hurtful, and I learned this as well. Oftentimes, we're, again, an older industrial city, we're always talking about we gotta attract more talent, and that is true. But if you are a resident or a student in our community today, that can also hurt because we've not been investing in the talent we already have. And so it's hard to move forward and attract more folks if we're not investing in that talent we already have today. And I'm telling you, if you want people in your organizations, you want to bring more talent, just talking about it isn't going to happen. We're going to have to expand that aperture of the talent pipeline by really bringing more folks into opportunity. It's one of the most effective things you can do. It is the only way to solve your business challenge. So if it is just economics to you, I say, please listen and take this seriously because it is the only way to stay competitive.
And I'm looking at, we got about 45 seconds left. Any last words from anybody?
So I'll just pull the thread on Jason's last comment. From an NGA perspective, we recognize that people are our most precious asset, right? And the diversity of the workforce represents our strategic advantage. And that's really powerful.
I would just say, jump in. Jump into the current. There's so much that each and every one of us can do. We touch so many people, right? Just be your authentic self, share, be an ally, and let's do it together.
Last word.
And if you don't know anything else to do, come to St. Louis because we're doing it. We invite you. It's fun. It's fun. It doesn't have to be scary. And we will keep building a bigger table for every single one of you that wants to come be a part of this because you're going to grow this industry and you're going to make a better country. And that is playing out right now in St. Louis. So I've done my official duty.
He gets paid for that, by the way. He's getting residuals.
That was awesome. Thank you. Give him a big hand.